Before we jump into this podcast, let's just have a first word from our sponsors, NordVPN, the fastest VPN in the world and an absolute essential travelling companion. You can use NordVPN on 10 devices with just one account, easily switching your virtual location to access apps and websites in other countries. But if you're out of the country, make sure that you've got NordVPN to be able to use your subscriptions and watch the live sport that you might miss. If you're at home, use it to see if you can save money with products that might be cheaper in another region. Go to nordvpn.com/Manchester to get 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. The link is also in the podcast description.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Manchester... Is it the Manchester is Red podcast or the Samuel Luckhurst Show? I get confused when I'm hosting these days. It might well be the Samuel Luckhurst Show. We'll go with that after I got a reprimand from Samuel last week for not giving it its official title. It's given away the person I'm joined by today. Samuel is with me. I'm Tyrone Marshall. The sun is shining on this Friday morning in Manchester. It is a beautiful day in Manchester. The sun was shining on United last night as well. Samuel, first of all, get the formalities out of the way. How are you this morning?
I'm not too bad. Not too bad, thank you. It's another tiring night, but you can't complain with all the travel and the privileges we have of this job.
Absolutely, and the Europa League has been a lot of fun for United this season. That's 13 goals now in the 3 home knockout legs. So yeah, an awful lot of fun and fun again last night. United are going to Bilbao. They're going back to Bilbao on May the 21st. A 7-1 aggregate win against Athletic in the semi-final, a result that nobody would have predicted 8-9 days ago when United flew out to Bilbao, and a scoreline that maybe slightly flatters United. And United 7, Athletic Club 1 sounds easy. Was it easy, Samuel?
It's probably the most misleading 7-1 scoreline anyone's ever clapped eyes on, obviously over 2 legs. But United's their pedigree in the Europa League, their love affair with the competition this season is quite remarkable. That's two rounds running that they've scored 7 goals across the 2 matches against Lyon and Athletic Bilbao. You look at last night. I mean, I didn't realise how late it was that Mason Mount scored, or relatively late. It was at the 72nd minute. And it wasn't a great shock to me to see United perform as badly as they did, because we've become so accustomed to it this season. And certainly with that side last night, it was overloaded with defensive players when it shouldn't have been. I understood why Amram did it in the first leg, where he's playing the percentages and he's been quite pragmatic, because they were coming up against the side that were actually favourites going into these 2 semi-final matches, and you're playing at San Mamés, and there's an element of trying to almost stay in the tie, really, going into the second leg, and it worked out better than anybody could have ever imagined. So I don't really understand why he felt the need to overload the team again with defensive players, and that sent out the wrong message. And lo and behold, as soon as that balance was addressed in the second half, United won at a canter in the end. And they are, I mean, Jekyll and Hyde doesn't really do them justice looking at their Premier League form and their Europa League form. Whilst their goal difference in the Premier League has gone towards the double digits in minus numbers, they've racked up, 19 goals in 6 knockout ties in the Europa League. I know competition's quality has been diluted, and United are probably the best equipped side to win it as well in terms of the means they've had at their disposal. But to have still gone 14 matches unbeaten is some going, and they've, as I said, they've won the amount of goals they've scored in the knockout rounds. It's just bizarre, but they are a bizarre team, and Amram can't work them out. He said at the post-match press conference, you don't know what you're going to expect, which can be a good thing or a bad thing, and a bad thing, I should say. And he said they have weaknesses, and he almost at times he feels rather sheepish that they've got to this point where their season is salvageable, They're not going to cop any flack from supporters, matchgoers, as they didn't last season at Selhurst Park. I think that game at Crystal Palace last year has kind of like raised the bar in terms of loyalty among the Manchester United matchgoers. In that, if there's something riding on the season, you're not going to, however bad you are, and they were appalling last season, they've been even worse this season, you're not going to get flack, even though you probably deserve it, because you've earned a reprieve through going through to the final in a cup competition. And I'd have argued last season it was warranted for the fans to actually turn on some of those players, because even when they did reach a cup final, it was in the most farcical circumstances imaginable. Yet this season, they have their mentality switch when it comes to the Europa League, even on a night where for 70 minutes, 60 minutes, they played so badly that they look like the Premier League version of United. They still end up scoring 4 goals and going through 7-1 on aggregate. And in the press room afterwards, when it was Chris Wheeler who essentially spelt it out that United just won a semi-final on aggregate 7-1, and he's just shaking his head. I'm shaking my head. People have got their mouths wide open. I don't know what to make of this team, and Amram certainly doesn't as well. When the manager is saying that he doesn't know what to expect from his players, nobody's able to fathom them. And in a strange way, the season can't end soon enough for him, because certainly next season they cannot tolerate this borderline schizophrenic change in performance from domestic to European competition.
Yeah, it was interesting when he said on Wednesday that not only does he not know which Manchester United are going to turn up, he doesn't know which United are going to turn up minute to minute within a game. And, you see that every week, and you saw it again last night. But I guess, let's flip the established order and start at the end, because the end is certainly where the positives were. 4 goals in 18 minutes to really put a gloss that this game and this tie didn't really deserve on. Like I say, it changed with those substitutions. All of them had a role. But it felt to me, I know Mount got 2 goals, we'll come on to him. It felt to me like it changed most of all with Ahmad. He brings a directness and an electricity to this United team that without him, it really lacks, doesn't it?
And he should have started last night. I know that they're being careful with him and with other players, but he's going to start against West Ham on Sunday. And I know it will be a very, very different atmosphere and different intensity, but they were 3-0 up going into the game last night. 3 days shouldn't make a difference. His presence it completely changed the balance of that team last night. The way you look at that team, it changes. The first time he got the ball, he went on a direct charge, and it'll be interesting to see where he starts the final, provided he's fit, because he is going to start the final. You can't go into that and have him on the bench. It would just be perverse, because you've got the option of playing him on the wing. Amram clearly prefers him to play as one of the 2 playmakers. Is that going to come at the expense, most likely, of Alejandro Garnacho? Because I don't see Bruno Fernandes dropping back into midfield now at this point. Since the March internationals, he seemed pretty settled back in the one of the 2 number 10 roles. And you look at Ahmad's form this season, under Amram in particular, he was a one-man band up until he got injured. And there were 2 or 3 times last night when he did something with the ball, and it's like you hear, it's crowd-pleasing football, but it's productive football as well. And Rasmus Højlund did not. I thought in the first half he led the line quite decently. The second half, fans were almost getting on his back at one time because he regressed that badly. He ends the night with a goal, a tap in, the kind of goal strikers live for, but it's all through the work of Ahmad. And I'm not surprised that he's made that much of a difference. I wasn't surprised that he had a reasonably good impact at Brentford as well. You know what he's going to do, but as we saw several years ago with Ian Robin, predictability can be a great strength if you're operating at pace and you're quick-footed, and Ahmad obviously is. And I think when you look at the squad that United have got, it's such a fascinating dynamic going into the Europa League final, because of Tottenham's record against United, because of Postecoglou, his pledge, he promised that I always win something in my second season. What's riding on it? It's going to be the most consequential Europa League final there's been. but the squad depth United have definitely trumps Tottenham's. There's an argument that Tottenham's team last night in Norway is better than United's. I'd argue that they've got a better goalkeeper. Their fullbacks, or Porro and Udogie, are they better than Dorgu or Dalot? Yes. I think they've got more technically rounded midfielders, not necessarily better midfielders, but I think they've got more of them available at their disposal, particularly watching Ugarte again last night, how poor he was with the ball. Van der Ven makes a huge difference as a centre-back. Solanke is a better striker than Højlund. He's not a particularly very good striker, but he's certainly better than Rasmus Højlund. Yeah, you look at their bench, and that could come into play in the Europa League final. United have one up on them there, and it is foreseeable that United could be turned into their bench for inspiration in the Europa League final to salvage the situation or win it. And they will have good options, whether Ahmad is starting or not. I think it's safe to say he will start that final. But if he's not starting, Garnacho's on the bench. You've got Garnacho. They could have Mason Mount. They'll probably have Kobbie Mainoo on the bench because I don't really see, unless there's an injury, him starting in Bilbao. And it was a real flex of the muscles last night from Amorim that he was able to quite decisively change things. I mean, he decided before the hour mark that Shaw, Mount and Ahmad were going to come on. And unfortunately for Athletic Bilbao, as soon as they came on, they petered out quickly than the pre-match pyrotechnics, because up until that point, I mean, Athletic Bilbao's substitutes were sprinting off because they still sensed an opportunity. And when you looked at that away end last night in isolation, it was just an absolutely resplendent side. It's going to really stick in the craw for them as supportive as they were last night, that they won't be hosting the final, because that would have been you'd probably struggled to spot any Tottenham or Bodo Glimt fans among them had Athletic Bilbao got there. And attacking that end, it was impossible not to be stirred by it. But those three changes took the game away from them. And you look at those three players who came on, in terms of their experience, in terms of their worth, what United have paid for them, and I suppose in Mainoo coming on a little bit later on, his pedigree as an academy graduate, it's difficult to keep up. And Athletic, of course, were handicapped by not having the Williams brothers, not having their top scorer, Danny Vivian, as well, absent, and people in Bilbao regard him as Athletic's best defender. So that I'd hesitate to say that United were lucky in the first leg, because I don't think they were. You could say Victor Lindelof was lucky that the ball hit him, absolutely, but they were definitely lucky that Athletic went to Manchester without 3 or 4 of their big players, because at times last night, never mind the Williams brothers, the Williams sisters could have troubled United. They were so poor in the first hour, but United being United in the Europa League, it's almost like we know how the story goes, and in the end, they somehow win a game 4-1 when they played well in it for about 20 minutes, probably.
Yeah, and those substitutions do show when players are getting fit that there is a depth to this squad. It does make a difference when Amorim can turn to the bench, and it was pretty clear early on he had to turn to the bench last night. The other positive was a substitute as well, Mason Mount, 2 goals to add to the one against Brentford. I mean, you'd say it's the best week of his United career, but there's not even any competition for that title, really. But it does feel like this has been a big week for him. You couldn't wipe the smile off his face last night. It was a brilliant moment for him. 2 brilliantly taken goals as well, wonderfully taken goals. You called it as Makeda-esque, his first. His second was great technique. He's clearly a player that Amorim absolutely loves. I think in the first interview he ever did as United head coach, when he spoke to the club's TV station, he said something along those lines of, "I have to tell you how much I love Mason Mount," and we saw it in the first training session. He's clearly a player that he wants to make use of, and this has been, it feels like potentially a breakthrough week for him. Is that fair?
Yeah, completely. The technique of both those goals last night was exceptional. I mean, the first one was identical to Federico Makeda's winner against Aston Villa at the same end, Stretford End 15 years ago. The second one, when you look back at it, the way the finesse he puts on that shot, how deliberately he hits it, just so that he's not He's not. He gets the right trajectory on it. It's not going to loop into the air. He's going to get the right pace on it. He knows where the goalkeeper is. He knows the goal's vacant. It's that is a technically proficient and perfect piece of conversion play, if you want to call it like that. It was almost like, someone, a golfer teeing, not teeing up, sorry, going off the, using a pitching wedge and getting it pretty much right on the pin. And it'll be interesting to see whether he can barge his way into that final 11 now, because they've only got 2 games before then. He will start, you'd think, against West Ham on Sunday. And then the Chelsea match, I think last season going into that game, I thought he should have started, just going off the back of scoring at Brentford while his tail was between his legs. Sorry, while he had his tail up. And he didn't. And then he got injured again pretty soon after that. That Chelsea game feels it's not important for United as far as the Premier League is concerned, but it'll be really important for Mount, in that there is clearly a player there that Amorim really rates, but there is also quite intense competition where you've got Fernandes as the captain, who's immovable from the starting 11. You've got Ahmad back in the team, and a lot of people, quite understandably, would feel as though he should be the second playmaker. You've got Garnacho, who started 14 games on the spin as one of the 2 playmakers. That run, I suspect, may come to an end due to the options they've got and the squad rotation that Amorim will exercise against West Ham. But Mount is a specialist for it, and he has experience of starting major finals. He started a Champions League final, and which we've gone on about quite a lot to not necessarily stake his claim, put a case in for him, but it's easy to forget how much experience he's accrued at a relatively young age, or certainly he did at Chelsea in his first full seasons in their team under Frank Lampard and Thomas Tuchel. And I wondered, and I think the turning point for him last night was that he did something with the ball. He did more than that. I mean, he scored 2 lovely goals. But for a playmaker, I've watched him so often and wondered what's he actually done with the ball during a game, and it's been next to nothing. And before the Brentford game, he was coming on in games, just getting booked, putting himself about. And to be honest, one takes a dim view of that, because he's a playmaker. He's meant to make the team play, and he wasn't doing that. But his goal at Brentford was good, well-timed run, read the pattern of play really well between Kobbie Mainoo and Alejandro Garnacho. He scored even better goals last night, 3 goals in 2 games, and there's something admirable about all 3 of those goals. And as I said before on this podcast, he's a player that United should never have signed. I mean, for the circumstances, they wanted to make a midfielder out of him in a 4-2-3-1, which you could see on his debut against Wolves just wasn't going to work. And even Erik ten Hag gave up on that at the start of this season. But by accident, he could become a useful or a successful player at Manchester United because of the system that Ruben Amorim plays. And it wasn't a great surprise that Amorim extolled Mount's virtues and said how much he loves him, because it's easy to see why a coach who plays that system would, in that Mount does fit into it. He is hardworking. As I've said a few times before, some of his best work for United has come off the ball, which isn't good enough for a Man United playmaker, but he's very good at pressing. And when he came on last night, I think I said to you, he's bringing him on really just to get them up the pitch, to press, to bring some energy. I wasn't thinking that he could get the ball and do what he did, because we've not seen that anywhere near often enough from Mount. But this needs to be a turning point for him now, because we've come towards the end of his second season at United. And yesteryear, if you didn't cut it after 2 years, United could cut you loose. And they're clearly not going to be able to do that. And they're not going to do that because Amorim really rates Mount. And there is a role for him to play in that team and squad next season. So it will be fascinating to see whether he can whether his fortunes will change now. I think there are still tweaks he's got to make, not in terms of his play, but I know he did the on-pitch post-match chat last night. He didn't do the mix zone, which wasn't a surprise to me, because for whatever reason, he does not talk unless he has to talk to Emily TV or occasionally a rights holder chat. I mean, he spoke to PLP after the Brentford game, which are just like, some of the questions can be, I think you can get tougher questions from pupils at a school at times with Premier League productions, but that's not a criticism of the reporters. That's the way Premier League productions functions. But it's an interesting story with Mount, and he needs to be a little bit more open, not just on the pitch, but off it as well.
Yeah, and I mean, one more. Let's touch on one more player, because I thought Leny Yoro had a good game again. It feels like he's really making progress as a United centre-half now. He did speak afterwards in the mix zone and kind of spoke about those Ferdinand comparisons, revealed he still speaks to Rio Ferdinand. They've done an interview together, but not just that, they speak off camera as well and takes a bit of advice from him. And, you put Euro Ferdinand into any social media platform at the moment and you're getting fans comparing the two. Still only 19, which is young for a centre-half. It feels like, I don't think it's any surprise really, given how highly he was rated. But the performances we're getting now are why United sign him, and why a lot of observers feel it could be, maybe it'll turn out to be their best signing of last summer, because there's a player of rich potential there, isn't there?
I think he's actually more mature than Ferdinand was at the same age. He's probably more mature than Ferdinand now, even in his late 40s. Some of the language that Rio Ferdinand comes out with, it is very much how do you do, fellow kids. But I think Yoro's been good since the March internationals. He's stayed fit. He's started the majority of games. Of course, getting a goal, you're going to get a bit more recognition from that, as he did against Lyon. But he's playing on the front foot. I can't remember what game it was. It might have been the second leg against Lyon, where actually I thought he was pretty dodgy and he didn't have that good a night. But in the absence of Martinez, United need a defender who's going to carry the ball forward from the back three, because you can't play with three defenders just being very rigid, remaining in their own third as a Manchester United side. And Yoro is starting to shoulder that responsibility, not necessarily with line-breaking passes as is Martinez's trademark, but actually moving into the final third. And it'll be really interesting to see what happens, hopefully, when Yoro and Martinez are starting together in a back three on a regular basis, because all of a sudden that looks like, it doesn't actually look that defensive, a back three, even though they are two defenders and they'd be joined by Harry Maguire or Matthias de Ligt. It has a real attacking flair about it, because both of them have definitely got it in their lockers. And Yoro, to be doing that at his age and the season that he's had, where he had that setback of fracturing his metatarsals during the pre-season tour, took a long time for him to get his debut. It was early December, wasn't it? And at that point, you're looking at it thinking, this is just a season of acclimatization, just adapting, just settling in, getting used to your new surroundings, learning the ropes. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Yet he's been more than happy to take on that pressure, and he stayed fit at exactly the right time. And that de Ligt's got injured, Aidan Hemmings got injured, Martinez, of course, got injured in early February. And if United were going to go far in the Europa League, they had to avoid some of the injury crises that they had towards the end of last season. If they had as many injuries as they did this time last year, I don't think they would be in the final of the Europa League. I don't think they'd have had the coping mechanisms to deal with that. But the injury list doesn't feel as it's not been as severe as last season. And Yoro, certainly during the first half last night or the first hour, Maguire was sloppy. Mazraoui wasn't at it. Amram said afterwards that he's still not got the real energy to play 90 minutes. Dorgu, I thought, you look at Patrick Dorgu and you think in a year's time we'll probably be talking about United needing a better left winger or a more established left winger, if it's at all possible. But Yoro was the one defender in that back three. I mean, I've not even mentioned Lindelof there, who literally played them into trouble with a couple of passes in the early stages, and that can really set the tone for a night, and it did for an hour. But Yoro was by far and away the most composed of the back three or the back five before United did kill the contest through Mount's first goal. And the the money they paid for him, it's not a great deal. Sorry, it's not a great deal to expect. It's not so much that, but for the money they paid for him, you'd have expected him to have been a first teamer at some point this season, and he is now, and he's a first teamer at exactly the right time. So I think he's pretty much, despite that early setback on the pre-season tour, it feels like he's possibly ahead of schedule now in his development. And the fact that nobody's actually mentioning the fee that they paid for him, which was rising to 70 million euros, he's got to take that as a compliment, because and again, in terms of, I talk about the maturity of Leny Yoro. I mean, his English is excellent, but also there he is stopping in the mix zone last night as well. And he'd done a pre-match press conference in Bucharest, I believe it was, that you were at in January. Mm-hmm. He's like, I think he's a lot more mature than people give him credit for, and what we've seen so far looks very, very promising.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, let's rewind to the bad bit then, shall we? United, it felt like the rockiest moment in this game was the first 15 minutes of the second half, maybe the first 20 minutes, when United had been poor in the first half. This was a chance to come in, regroup, and things got worse. And I mean, Athletic didn't really have any clear chances in that moment, but you mentioned the away end before. They were attacking that away end. The noise and the support was unbelievable in that period from the away end. And it almost felt like the Athletic players could sense that something was coming, that something was brewing. There was a real connection between the fans and the players in terms of the belief, even though it was 3-1. And, I turned to you, and we only just had our flights booked for Bilbao. And suddenly I turned to you thinking, like, this is not looking good all of a sudden. And I mean, in that 15-minute spell, I really feared for them. And that was Ahmad said pre-match on Wednesday, we're going to have to suffer to reach the final. And I think we all kind of raised eyebrows and thought, I'm not sure you are, mate. But boy, they really had to suffer in that period, didn't it? And that was a nervy, horrible moment in the game. And you could sense it within the stands as well.
Well, there were a lot of worried murmurs last night. And as I said last week, United have lost 3-0 at home 3 times this season. And one of them was under Amrim as well. They lost 3-0 3 times last season. It's not... when United lose these days, even when they concede 4 against Brentford or Newcastle, you shrug your shoulders because we're that accustomed to it. It's not losing to Brentford at the weekend and a bottom half finish being confirmed was not even back page news. The shock factor of United being crap has gone out the window this season. It feels like this calendar year, really. It's almost strange how the season has been separated into 2 very specific halves. Since that 2-0 home defeat to Newcastle, I think anyone sound of mind has had the sense that they are going to finish in the bottom half of the table. They weren't even going to finish, never mind the top 4, they weren't going to finish in the top half. And Amrim, since then, there have been a couple of occasions, most infamously post-Brighton, where he said, I think this might be the worst team in the club's history. And it's a great quote. Not entirely true, because, of course, they did get relegated 51 years ago. But even on Wednesday, he was very specific about, he's doubling down on that, nearly 4 months later. And it's a great quote, but I'm thinking, like, from a news angle, is it the top line? It's probably the best quote in terms of what he's actually said. But he said this back in January. They have factually become worse since then, to the point that they are 15th in the Premier League. It didn't feel that seismic, because I've been at every United game bar 2, I think, this season. You've been at probably 30 odd or 40 odd. Struggle to keep count times. It's not a big deal that United lose, and it wasn't shocking that they were 1-0 down last night. I wouldn't have been shocked if they'd gone 2-0 down. As I said earlier, the Williams sisters, never mind the Williams brothers, could have given them problems. It was a little bit strange to see how they went into Premier League mode last night in terms of their performance level. But again, I go back to what I said in terms of Amrim having to shoulder some responsibility for that, in that he is overloading the team with defensive players quite often still. And I suspect he'll continue to do that for the rest of the season. I don't agree with it, but from his perspective, he's probably thinking, I can't trust these players to manage a more attack-minded balance. I'm going to have to wait for next season and getting new players in for that. And I fully understand where he's coming from there, but still, your Man United at home coming up against Athletic Bilbao, who were almost waving the white flag when their squad was announced on Wednesday. When you saw the glaring omissions of Iñaki Williams and Nico Williams, we knew Vivian was going to be suspended. We knew that Oyhan Santet, the top scorer, was going to be unavailable again. So that's four of their most significant players. And still United, Amrim's feeling was, right, we need to be pragmatic, we need to keep it tight. And in fairness, they haven't been trounced too often this season, certainly compared with last season or the Solskjaer Rangnick season. But they've lost way more often than they did in either of those seasons. And that vulnerability, it'll be interesting to see how that Europa League final plays out, because the dynamic it really is fascinating in that Tottenham should look at United's team and not fear it. They really shouldn't. But then you look at United's Europa League record and it is daunting. It would be daunting for Tottenham. And Tottenham haven't won a final since 2008. They've been in, what would it be, 4 or 5 finals since then, 2008, 2009, 2015, 2021 League Cup finals, 2019 Champions League final. I don't think they've got to an FA Cup final, have they? Peculiarly. So everybody knows about typical Tottenham Spurs. It's entered the football lexicon. And yet, if I'm just trying to be an objective Tottenham player who couldn't care less about Jamie O'Hara's saved penalty in 2009 or all these other final failures that they've had, just look at the Man United team. But then again, Tottenham are below them in the Premier League table. And I'm sure there are still some people out there claiming that those positions are false when they're not. They are, those two teams, as far as the Premier League is concerned, they are that bad. And yes, the Europa League progress would have sidetracked them in some of their Premier League games where they've been rotating and they can't really be bothered with the league games, which I wouldn't say it's unforgivable. It's unsurprising. It's the footballers, their mentality. If there's something riding on the season in one competition, nothing riding on the season in the other competition, they're not going to be running at the full pelt. They're not going to be going flat out in both of them. And come the final, what they serve up, I'd like to think it'll be a treat. I don't think it's going to be I don't think it'll be akin to the Gdansk final in 2021, which was really, it was 120 minutes of drudgery and this tactical disaster class from Ole Gunnar Solskjaer running Marcus Rashford into the ground on a night where even the announcer said Rashford was coming off because he thought he should come off, and it was actually Paul Pogba whose number was on.
Yeah, it felt last night like, United played for the first hour, 65 minutes, like they were terrified. There was none of the composure or control or calmness of a team you would expect that is winning a game 3-0 at home, essentially. And as happy and as ecstatic as Amorim looked at full time, it felt to me like a night where he will learn more about these players from the first 65 minutes than he will the last 25. And as much as United have reached a final, and it looks like they've reached it very comfortably, it also felt like a night and an hour or 65 minutes where he probably made judgments on a lot of those players about their capabilities going forward, not just in terms of ability, but in terms of mentality as well.
Well, Lindelof, I don't know why he started last night. He's going to get released at the end of the season. He was lucky to start last week. He should never have started last night. So he's going. You notice that Onana had to be told how to kick a ball by Amorim early in the second half. Onana relishes the responsibility and that senior status that he has. He's a 29-year-old, but if he's struggling to work out how to kick a ball, to almost waste time or not to invite Athletic Bilbao players to come charging towards his goal, then you've got a problem there. The rest of the team, I think the majority of them will still be starting the final. As I said earlier, I feel a little bit sorry for Dorgu in that they've signed a left back from relegation fodder in Serie A, and essentially they're trying to make him play a role that Ryan Giggs played during his pomp in the 90s. If Dorgu is a success, great, it's worked out brilliantly. But also, I would not be surprised if this time next year we're looking at that Man United squad and saying they need a left winger. They need a much improved player on the left wing, someone who's more senior, not a raw option, who was relatively cost efficient. Although I'd still say £25 million is still quite a steep amount for a left back who's playing at Lecce, rising to £29 million. But his decision making was all right, to say the least. And I think he has regressed a little bit in recent weeks, having gone through a reasonably decent period. But again, I don't think you can necessarily underestimate the absence of Dalot there. They had a pretty good balance with both of them on the flanks. And now Dorgu all of a sudden is ping-ponging from left wing to right wing. He was on the right wing for a period last night as well, because United don't have a senior right winger to come on or to play in that role when Mazraoui seems to be at the limit, the way he's being managed by Amorim. Højlund, as I said earlier, I thought he did okay in the first half, but then the second half, when the crowd start sighing at you losing the ball again, the regression is quite stark, and everyone knows that he's going to get replaced as a starting striker in the summer, and so he should. Garnacho, I think, has actually overall he's done quite decently this season, but the problem with that miss last night is that I remember vividly him being in similar situations in his first full season against Burnley and against Leeds up that end, one-on-one, and one-on-one seemed to be his kryptonite. And 2 years on, you are entitled to ask more from him in those situations. He has got to be more clinical, even though I think his work rate and the way he's adapted to Amorim's system have been quite commendable. And he is still a player that, if United is selling him in the summer, I think there's something wrong with the club rather than the player. I completely get, Antony, get him out. Rashford, get rid. Sancho, get rid. Tyrone Marshall, etc. But Garnacho should not be high up on that list, or indeed on that list at all, in terms of players that United should be looking to sell.
Yeah, one thing that is a concern is this habit United are suddenly back in of starting games slowly. Amorim flagged it at San Mamés last week and said they'd started poorly at Bournemouth, and he'd kind of told them to expect an early onslaught from Athletic. They started poorly again and gave the ball away a lot in that first 20 minutes last week and kind of got away with it. This week, again, it felt like the tone was set in the first 20 minutes. They were sloppy on the ball, simple mistakes, giving it away, kind of inviting that pressure on, and it gives the opposition the momentum, and it's hard to reverse that in a game sometimes, and certainly in the first half. And looking at the head-to-head between United and Tottenham this season, Tottenham scored after 3 minutes at Old Trafford in September, after 15 minutes in the League Cup game in December, and after 13 minutes in the Premier League game in February, I think that was, wasn't it? So there's kind of a pattern here in United's play at the moment, and a pattern in the 3 previous games that Tottenham are taking early leads against United. And I mean, surely in a final, they're going to start better than they have done, but they've started 2 semi-finals poorly. And it kind of feels like a real area of concern for me going into the final, that they've got to be coming out the traps quicker. And I don't know why they aren't.
Well, I mean, Spurs had an infamously bad start in the Champions League final, didn't they, 6 years ago, when they conceded a penalty within 2 minutes, something like that. I think it was so early. Strangely, I think those 3 games, if you look at them individually, the 3-0 home defeat in September, I think you can dismiss that because it was just an extension of last season, where happy clappy fans thought Erik ten Hag was still the right man to be the Manchester United manager, and the power brokers didn't actually know how to properly run a football club still at that point, so they kept him in situ. I think after that day, they actually realised, yeah, we are probably going to have to sack him here. That game, that performance, the result, it was so reminiscent of some of the horror shows last season. The League Cup tie, they made 5 changes. They had Altay Bayındır in goal. They had Antony on the wing. Must have been one of 2 or 3 games he started all season. Christian Eriksen was even starting in that game. it was so madcap that Bayindir wasn't even actually the worst goalkeeper on the pitch. It was Fraser Forster, who was just an absolute walking disaster. And then the game in February, 8 of United subs have never played for the club before. So you can cut them a little bit of slack. I mean, I think it was Gary Neville who went quite overboard over how bad United were that day. This was a team that had been losing loads of games this season, that lost 1-0, that didn't disgrace themselves. I think everybody expected them to lose because of the senior players that they were without as well. So I don't think it's something for United to dread that they've lost 3 games against Tottenham this season. It is a standalone game. I think those 3 games are largely irrelevant. Both teams have not really, certainly as far as their league form is concerned, they've not advanced whatsoever since then in terms of performance level or results. I think Tottenham might have only won 4 or 5 games since they beat United. When was that game? It must have been mid-February, I think. So we're talking about 3 months ago. And just looking at it now, where is it? They've beaten Ipswich, Alkmaar, Southampton, Eintracht Frankfurt, and Bodo Glimt twice. Which, when you read that out, it's pretty much so similar to how United go about their form as well, how they've gone about their form. So it's a strange one because Spurs' record under Postecoglou against United is excellent. 1-4, drawn 1. The draw at Old Trafford last season, they were the better team. But given that there's been a managerial change and those 2 games under Amorim, they don't have asterisks against them necessarily, but there's a lot of context behind why they lost those games in very, very different ways. I mean, I think we were all looking forward to the February one because we thought it could be as eventful as the League Cup tie. And in the end, it was pretty uneventful, primarily because United had a bunch of school children on the bench and they didn't make a change until the 89th minute, and they don't score goals, and they were never going to threaten Tottenham after James Maddison scored. So to quote Ten Hag, he said earlier in the season, didn't he? He said about that Tottenham game, I deny it. I deny it because Bruno Fernandes got sent off and we were able to appeal and the red card was overturned, completely ignoring the first 40 odd minutes where Tottenham absolutely wiped the floor off them and humiliated them. And the only surprise was that it was only 1-0. But I think for Amorim's planning going into this game, I think he can just disregard those games. I don't think there's a great deal to learn from them. Maybe 1 or 2 pointers to take on board. I remember Maddison's goal, it came from Son Heung-min getting the ball on the left wing, and Diogo Dalot was not quick enough to close him down 30 seconds after Amorim told him to get tied to Son. So things like that, absolutely, they'll get raised in the analysis. But those performances largely, I don't think they're that relevant going into the final in just under 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, absolutely. Finally, then, there is a game this weekend. The Let's Not Finish 17th derby between United and West Ham. Tottenham also in that conversation, of course. Does anyone care? I mean, it feels like these games are essentially meaningless now, aren't they? Like you say, Ahmad should get a start and get a run out. We might see some more kids. We might see a debut for Camerson and Mantato. We might see United win and kind of edge clear of the possibility of finishing 17th. It's certainly the game they're most likely to win of the 3 left in the Premier League. But in reality, we're just kind of ticking them off before Bilbao now, aren't we?
We are. We'll look forward to the full English breakfast at 11 a.m. if it's still out. We'll look forward to a quiet press room. We'll look forward to the sunny weather because the forecast is looking good. We'll look forward to watching some good players on both sides. Obviously, Kudus and Bowen, and West Ham have remarkably, they've actually got some good players despite where they are in their league. United will have some players out that have not been getting starts as much recently, but there's every chance it'll just go the way of the Wolves game a few weeks ago and they'll lose 1-0 at home because look at their league form, look how many times they've won in the league this season. It's 10 wins in 35. I think they've won 6 times under Amorim, isn't it? In 24 games, I believe. the expectation level is not high. But as I said earlier, they're not going to get any flack off match goers because they've got a Europa League final to play for, and that harmony at Selhurst Park last season, after getting absolutely trounced by Crystal Palace, it did no harm because a couple of weeks later, improbably they won the FA Cup against the best team in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's hope they can finish the job off this season and win the Europa League. That's everything for now. Thank you for your time, Samuel.
Thank you, Ty. Appreciate it.
Please remember to subscribe to get the latest podcasts building up to that Europa League final in your feed. Leave us a review as well if you've enjoyed it. We'll be back on Monday to dissect that West Ham game. If anything, well, we'll be back whatever, even if anything interesting happens or not. So that'll be your next podcast. But for now, thanks for listening and goodbye.